Hello again, everyone. It's Professor Muldrow, and I'm going to do more about files in Chapter 6. Now, in the code you're looking at right now, as you can see, once again, I am putting my throws clause in main, which I have to do because I'm working with files. In this case, I'm using a file called hockey2.txt. Now, here is the hockey2 file. This is the actual file. For each line, for each hockey player, we start off with the jersey number the player wears, followed by the team that that player plays for. The rest of the data is the same as it was in the previous video. First name, last name, and goals scored over the last 5 NHL seasons. However, when you're dealing with data in this way, where you have a lot more mixed types of data. For example, you start with an integer, then you have strings, then you have integers again. When you're mixing types more often in data in a file like this, token-based processing can lead to errors. What can happen is, suppose we read the first 5 seasons worth of goals for Alex Ovechkin, then we get to the 97. If we use next int, there's a chance that the computer will think the 97 is the next number of goals for Alex Ovechkin, rather than the jersey number of Sidney Crosby, and then the program could crash because now we're reading the wrong type of data. So to read data from this file, we're not going to use token-based processing. We're going to use line-based processing. And here's how that works. Here in main, after creating the scanner object that is associated with the file, I set up a while loop. Look at my condition in this while loop. It's input.hasNextLine. In the previous video, we used input.hasNext. In this video, I'm using input.hasNextLine. And what I'm going to do is then read an entire line of data. As you can see, here is a string variable named text, and I'm using input.nextLine to read data. So what's going to go into the variable text is not just the 8, it's this entire first line of data. This entire first line of data will be assigned to the variable text. So that's the first thing you do in line-based processing. Now, in this particular program, I created another method called hockey data. It is not necessary to create another method when you do line-based processing. I just did it this time. So here is the hockey data method. It has a string parameter. The first thing I do in this method is that I'm going to create a second scanner object that is associated with the line of text I just read. This is how line-based processing works. You read an entire line of data, not just the next token. You read an entire line of data from the file. And when you do that, you then create a second scanner object that is associated with the line of text that you just read. That's what this scanner info is doing. It is not associated with the file hockey2.txt. It's associated with the line of text that was just read, namely this. It's associated with just this one line. So now I'm going to use this scanner object named info to process the data on that line. As you can see, I get the number, I get the team, I get the first name, I get the last name. Use a while loop to add up how many goals were scored in the last 5 seasons. And then I will output the data. And then when this hockey data method is finished, I go back to main and I come back to this condition while input has next line. Well, as long as there are still lines of text in the file, that method gives me a true. So now we read the second whole line of data, which is put into the text variable. And then we call the hockey data method again. And this line of text with Sidney Crosby gets sent to the hockey data method. And the same processing happens. And that keeps happening until we run out of lines of data in the file. And when you run this program, here is your output. Alex Ovechkin wears number 8, plays for the Capitals. There's his goals. Sidney Crosby wears 97 and plays for the Penguins, and et cetera, and et cetera. Now I'm going to pause the video for a moment, but when we start again, I will show you how you can do output to a file. Stay tuned. Okay, I'm back. Thank you for waiting. Now, what I told you what would happen when I came back is I would show you how to do output to a file. If you want to do output to a file in Java, you must create an object like this. It is called a print stream object. Scanner is for input. Print stream is for output. Print stream is contained within, I believe it's java.util. And what I'm doing is I'm calling this print stream object, I've named it output, and I'm associating it with a file named results.txt. Now, in case you're wondering, here's my directory where my hockey2 file is. But do you notice there is no results.txt file in this directory? And guess what? There doesn't have to be. That's the cool thing about output files. They don't have to exist before you run the program. If the file doesn't exist, it gets created on the fly. Now what I'm doing is I've added this print stream object as a second parameter to my hockey data method. Okay, notice I've got output right there as a second parameter, so I changed this method. So here in the definition of the hockey data method, there's my string parameter, and I've added a second parameter, which is a print stream, and I needed a name for it, so I called it PS, print stream PS. The only place that this print stream parameter comes into play is right here at the bottom. Remember when I displayed the data before, I was using system.out.println to do it. Now look what I've done. I say ps.println. That tells the compiler, okay, PS is a print stream object. That means do not display the data in the terminal window like you did before. Put the data into this results.txt file. Let me show you how that works. I've compiled it. So now I'm going to run it. Now bring up my my directory with all my files in it. So let me now run this program. I'll say void main. Okay. And look what happened over here. Hey, there's a results.txt file that showed up. That's what the print stream object did. If I open that results file, well, looky here. There's Alex Ovechkin, there's Sidney Crosby, there's Evgeny Malkin, and there's Vladimir Tarasenko. But this time it's in a file instead of in the terminal window. So a print stream object, which in this particular program was passed as a parameter, doesn't have to be. So this output object gets mapped to this one called PS. It was used down here to put data into a file as opposed to the terminal window. Once again, there are things that I did not cover in this video that are in the PowerPoints and the textbook. Please feel free to consult both of those for any topics that pop up on the quiz or in Practice It that I may have left out of these videos. If you have any other questions, please send me an email kmuldrow@lbcc.edu.